As many of you who followed me over the last few years on my movie channel, you'll know that I'm a big Paul Newman fan. I actually found a movie in my collection that I'd overlooked, and so I'm going to correct that today. I'm going to review Pocket Money, 1972. It's directed by Stuart Rosenberg, and the screenwriters from the book by Jim Kay, the book Jim Kane by J.P.S. Brown and John Gay, include one Terrence Malick, who went on to bigger and better things after this. Laszlo Kovacs is behind the camera, and the music by Alex North. So to the cast then: Paul Newman in the lead role is Jim Kane, Lee Marvin is Leonard, Christina Belford plays Adelita, and a few more. Strother Martin plays Garrett. What have we got here then? It's a friendly shaggy dog type of story, modern day western comedy based on a novel by Kane. Collaborations that were many between Rosenberg and Newman. They also combined on Cool Hand Luke and The Drowning Pool. It plays out as a character study in contrast between two cowboys with big dreams, the naive Jim Kane and the hard-living but slow-witted Leonard, played by Marvin. These two yokels are taken advantage of in Mexico, and they team up in a cattle smuggling scheme to cross the border to Texas. Yeah, it sounds just like what I imagined it would be. It's described though by Dennis Schwartz, a movie critic that I often look at, as an actionless western going against the tradition that relies on the wry humour and intelligent script and the brilliant atmospheric photography by Kovacs. And let's give it a go. It opens up with some sort of country cowboy style music that's quite genteel, and we witness early on over the soundtrack Newman is involved in capturing wild horses, and we see the ranch setting where he's trying to organise them, trying to get the necessary veterinarian jabs to help them their survival, and he's clearly going to be involved in trading these wild animals. And there's a very amusing take where he's just about to complete an injection on a young grey, and the grey is a bit cheesed off and yelps her head back, or his head, and pushes Newman to the ground, and he looks up and then attempts to sort of scold the horse, but there's an element of comedy about it, although I'm not suggesting that we should approve of hitting animals, but it's sort of more a gesture than any great intent to injure. Newman's very much a naive character, impulsive, doesn't sort of do his homework. Anyway, he trots along to the bank to get some more extended credit because he ain't got no dough, and reluctantly the bank manager agrees for another 6 weeks, which Kane tells him is the duration of the quarantine, and so after that, of course, he'll be rolling in it, tongue in cheek. Kane's desperate for work, and although his friends around him try to dissuade him, he ends up with this guy Garrett. He's going across into Mexico and going to bring back some cattle. his friends say that this guy isn't to be trusted, but although he initially goes down that road, the temptation is too much, and so he agrees. He's going to go down, buy this cattle, bring it back for this so-called scammy type of hustler. So Cain gets to the Mexican town, seeking out Leonard, who was his last contact with the horses. That was a disaster, and he wants to re-engage with him to get contact to buy these cattle, and that's when we run into Lee Marvin. Down in Mexico, Leonard and Newman's character going about their search for cattle as part of this deal, and they engage in some social talk, trying to basically strike a deal that's favourable for them, and we get into the usual sort of I can provide you with this for this price, and countering, well, I've only got this price, the usual sort of deal conversation. But Good gets sidetracked by a young woman who talks about horses, which is what he knows more about, and he ends up taking on a sort of not a threat but a suggestion by her, who's highly competent at riding bareback with untamed horses. It's almost a situation where she cajoles Newman's character into trying to reel in a fresh horse without saddle, and of course he quickly takes the bait. The inevitable happens, of course, and the horse throws Newman's character before 10 seconds have passed, so he looks a bit of a prat, but it's a sort of comedy, isn't it? His name's Cain, of course, the old memory playing tricks. And then we have Cain walking after the comic event with the woman, the experienced horsewoman, and they sort of share pleasantries. They're clearly attracted to each other, and she wants to know his past with regard to women, back where he comes from. So we're in the town of Adjo in Arizona, and the film seems to get stuck in some sort of issues that complicate the deal to a lesser or greater extent. Very much macho small talk, to be honest, but the deal, the location of where he was Jim's supposed to bring the cattle is changed into a new location, which Jim spells out will lead to them being quarantined. But it's all sort of, it all adds to very little to the script, and it really is becoming quite mediocre, this movie. I just noted that this offering, pocket money, was funded by an association called First Artists, which included Newman's Poitier, Streisand, McQueen and Hoffman as the funders. So it was felt to be rather underwhelming. Jim is rather lacking in bartering skills, and so the deal that he thought he had is scuppered because he doesn't understand the local culture and assumes that he's got a superior position because he wants to buy and he's got money. The locals, of course, are willing to part with their cattle until they get the right price, and that at one stage suggests it's well beyond Jim, even though Leonard's doing some translation because the language again is an issue. So the anticipated events continue. Jim's fracas with one of the Mexicans who was going to be involved in the business deal becomes a little uncooperative. The shenanigans take place. Jim gets arrested for virtually nothing, but it doesn't matter. It's of course a case of locals are always truthful, honest and correct. Gringos are always the opposite of that. So Leonard has to flog the car to get Jim out of prison because the Mexican guy trumped up some charges against him and requires a cash settlement for release, blah 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 blah. It's all scamming really, but it's supposed to be comedic. I'm not sure it is. After the check that's given to Jim for his services for the cattle, that is, bounces, his frustration at being scammed and leads him and Bernard to move the cattle anyway. And there's a meeting with a banker. Is amusing. And then him and Leonard are seen sort of having a moment with the said cattle, sort of within arm's length, going about their business. It's hardly tiring work, put it that way. As the cattle and the horses, of course, that are carrying Leonard and Jim arrive at a waterhole, we hear that infamous quote, "You can ... to water, but you can't ... make it drink." The ... reflects Leonard's quote on the movie, but it really is becoming quite a drain on my attention to follow this. Not one of Newman's best, even though it's still interesting to see his characterization. The film sort of peters out really, very inconclusive. The
delivery of the cattle takes place, but the settlement of the spoils is left up in the air, and it's almost a lesson in sort of don't be conned, don't be scammed. There's a final scene where Leonard and Ron exchange facts, and they're both great actors, so you can look at the pure acting rather than the nonsense of the script. And then there's quite a nice closing tune. Not quite sure who's singing it. Sounds a little bit like Bonnie Raitt, but she's a bit more country. And that's about it. A very disappointing film. Paper Money, Stuart Rosenberg, with a script by Terrence Malick. That's the thing that really lets it down, is that the fact that there's all these strong people involved in it. So why is it so mundane? Anyway, that's my take on it. Okay, the soundtrack, the title track, Pocket Money, written and performed by Carole King. I thought it sounded pretty nice.